good afternoon, and welcome to the Living Well program. You can find us here every Wednesday at 1 p.m. on KATB 89.3 in Anchorage, as well as KJLP 88.9 in Palmer. You can also listen live online at katb.org. Also, be sure to check us out on our Facebook page at Living Well Radio. And don't forget, we are available on iTunes. Just download the Living Well podcast there. My name is Cammie, joined by Betty.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, as well as Renee Duncan joining us.
Happy New Year.
Again in the studio. We love you coming over and
Thank
just
you.
having good discussion with us, Renee. Always
We're not going to
grateful.
call her a guest anymore.
Nope. We
Oh, you're
decided-
not?
No.
Nope.
Oh, I feel so special.
We haven't decided what we're going to call you, but it's not going to be a
It's
guest.
just not late for supper.
Which means the free water is no longer.
That's right.
Oh, yeah, where is my water?
There just happens to be one right
Oh,
here.
I'm impressed. Thank you.
Anyhow, we've had some things stirring for quite some time, haven't we, Betty?
Like
Well,
stirring.
I'm kind of jumping ahead
Yes.
into our show. I want to ask you one question first. Actually, I want to ask you both. Are the trees still up?
Yes.
Yes.
Probably will be up for another 2 weeks.
That was so funny. I hear that grudgingly. Do you
Well-
think most people have already taken their Christmas decorations down?
Yes.
You do? I
A
don't.
lot of people have.
Really? I think that a lot of them wait till the first week of January, most likely.
Yeah.
I would
My
assume.
intent was to do it yesterday, but
Why would you want to give up those beautiful lights in that cheery corner of your room? I don't understand that.
you know, that's true. That's true. It is beautiful, but there comes a point where I've had enough. You
Yeah.
know, and I want to get my house back in order and everything straightened up, but it just hasn't happened yet. It will one day this week, maybe.
Well, it's going to be 2 weeks because I'm going on vacation. So it's got to wait till I come back.
Oh my goodness, that's too funny. So the end of January, I know what you'll be doing. I don't know. I've started leaving lights up in some places, just white lights going up the stairs or something, and leave those on through the duration of the winter. So it kind of maintains that sparkly,
I've
lit
often
up
thought,
atmosphere.
you know, what would be the problem if I just left it up all year? And then next December, I wouldn't have to worry about it.
Well, you know, one year I tried to do an extended holiday type of a thing where I started with Christmas and then I would switch to Valentine and then I would switch to St. Patrick's Day. But it got really expensive, so I stopped doing it.
Really?
Yeah, because it's a tree. Trees are year round, you know, and I love the lights on my tree. It just is cheery to me to sit there and look at it. So why not decorate it for each one of the holidays? But I ran out of steam.
You know
That's
what,
way
Betty?
too much energy for me.
Instead of the 12 days of Christmas, you should do the 12 months of Christmas.
I could,
and just
couldn't I?
keep Christmas going and give us a little nugget every month.
There you
How
go.
that's doing for you. I want to talk to you in August.
In August.
When you're sitting by your tree and your stockings.
You know, actually, none of it's in the way at the moment. It's all really kind of clutter-free at the moment. So I'll think about that.
That would be a unique thing to put out there, wouldn't it, as a little project?
Yeah.
Well, people leave their outside lights up on all year.
They do. That drives me nuts.
Not me. In fact, years ago, I couldn't get my husband to hang the lights on the house. You know, he was too busy, all that kind of stuff. And so every time I drove by a house with lights on it, this is kind of manipulative, but I'm just being transparent here. And every time we drove by, I tell my daughters, I go, you know what? Where there's light, there's love, right? So every time we drove by a house with lights, they go, where there's light, there's love. And so one day they're driving around with their daddy and he goes, isn't that a pretty house? Oh, yes, Daddy. Where there's light, there's love. And he kept hearing it, and then my lights got put out.
Oh,
That's good. I like the way you did that. So much better than nagging.
yes.
That was a
Let
good
the
tip.
kids do it.
Yeah.
Like I said, manipulative.
Oh, that's why we love Renee, because she's so transparent. Speaking of transparent, that's going to kick us off for today's show, because Betty and I have just kind of been talking about some of these words that we kept hearing throughout this last year. And I know Renee's been hearing them too, kind of the 2017 buzzwords of, say, small group, Bible study. And so what we kind of found those to be is the word authentic, transparent, and community. And then there's the phrase of doing life together. So we have put those all together and we have named this show the Authentic, Transparent Community Doing Life Together
Show.
Show. And that's what we're going to do today. So we're going to have fun just kind of talking about each of those words, because what we hear, the context that we're hearing these words and phrases is that people desire these things. But yet I can't help but be stirred with the question of, do they really? And so I think that's what's kind of brought us here today, is talking about those words. What do they really mean to people, and how are they impacting people, and do they really want to incorporate that into their life?
I think that a lot of those words are just repeating the same thing, the same heart. And that's just having communication in a way that ties hearts together, being real, being authentic. All of those things are basically saying the same thing. But I do see a abuse of it in some circles. Yeah. Personally.
Yeah.
I know, you're both looking at me. Well, first I went and I looked up the definitions to the words.
Of course.
Because maybe I had the wrong thoughts about it, but no, I didn't. They mean what I thought they meant. I guess you could say I'm not real fond of these words, only because I don't think, and this is just my opinion, my thoughts. Most people do not want other people to be authentic and transparent.
Well, and that's the key, because what we hear and read is a lot about guiding us to be authentic and transparent and how to have community. But then the truth is do other people truly even want that from us?
Now,
Are they prepared for it?
I think it's a little bit different if you're with a small group of people and people that you know and you trust, and they're asking maybe your opinion or your thoughts on things, or have you ever been through certain things before, and you're sharing with them. That's a little bit different than just
posting on Facebook.
Yeah, posting it on Facebook or with a large group of people in general. So I probably should back up and say that first, that I do see a difference when we talk about social media, or just overall. I don't believe that most people want you to be real, transparent all the time.
Yeah, I mean, because really the problem with me is, if you ask how I'm doing, my problem isn't that I'm just okay saying fine. I really say fine because I think that's probably what you want to hear. And I think that's where the problem lies, is my issue is not being transparent and authentic. It's, I really don't think you care enough to hear me tell you.
Do you think some of it too, though, is trust? If you don't trust to share with somebody that they will hold that precious and not misuse it, the information,
sure,
then you're far more willing to go a little bit more in depth. The other thing too is time allotments. Usually when people ask you that, they're like, "Hi, how you doing, Cammie? Oh, good. I'm so glad to see that. See you later, or I'll see you at church." They don't have a half an hour to sit there and process with you some of the pain you might be walking through at that moment.
Then don't ask how you're doing.
Exactly.
Yes. Because that question.
Well, you know what? All around the world, there's different ways that you greet somebody in your community. Like in Africa, it was, you always ask about their family. "Hello, how you doing? How is your family doing?" That's how you met everybody. And if you didn't do that, you were easily offended in the situation or caused offense. And in us, here in America, it's, "Hi, how you doing? Oh, good. Take care. Bye." And it all it is a social interaction. When I was at college, I was walking with one guy, and people were going by, "Hi, how you doing? Hi, how you doing?" And the third person, he goes, "Hi, yeah, I'm doing terrible. My dad just died and my dog got run over." And the person just kept walking about another 60 feet, and then all of a sudden they stopped and turned around with this perplexed look, and he just smiled at him and kept walking.
Well, has that not happened to you?
Yeah.
When people will come up to you and they'll say, "Hi, how are you?" And you say, "Oh, I'm not having a really good day," or not too good. And they'll say, "Oh, okay, good."
They don't know what to do.
Well, they didn't hear. They weren't really listening.
Yeah, that's true.
They weren't really listening.
Yeah. I with me, a lot of it is I'm not really sure that they, like you said, truly want to know what I'm really feeling inside. But also, I think it's because in the past, there's been times where people have abused what I've shared, and they've used that to control situations. And so when that happens, you have a tendency to be a little bit more careful about your deepest feelings that you're struggling with. And then sometimes I just don't know how to verbalize it.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying, and I totally agree. So, and I like that you've brought to light that really that's just kind of a social, cultural interaction. And so that brings light why people do that. And that's why I think it's important that we be intentional of kind of seeking a few people out and asking them how they're really doing and providing that time for them to truly share. But I'm not even talking about sharing, the deep things that we're struggling with. I'm talking about maybe I just want to celebrate with you something that's really victorious in my life right now. Do you want to hear that?
I
when
do.
you ask how I'm doing. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, yeah.
Do people want to hear that?
I don't know. There's kind of a mix. They have a very short attention span, and if it's not interesting right out of the gate, you lose them.
So we're all ADD.
Apparently.
It is so true. And that's why we're talking about this today, just to kind of bounce these ideas off. I love the different perspectives and insight to it. And you can tell we all have direct experience with it, too.
Well, the thing that it brings up, too, is vulnerability. If something has happened in my life that's not good, or if I share it with people, or if I'm struggling with something, are they still going to view me in the same way?
That's true. But don't you think also that it has a lot to do with whatever was in my brain before I started talking?
It's being that grandparent.
It must be. It must be what. I'll claim that at the moment. Yeah, it went out the window.
It did. It'll come back.
Yeah.
It'll come back like a boomerang.
Come back. Come back.
Well, I think, too, what we're talking about can be perceived differently, like I said, if you're with a small group. I know I have been involved in small groups or life groups or Bible studies, and the leader, if you will encourage to be transparent or to be real, to share your story. That's a little bit different than, as an example, going on Facebook and sharing everything that's going on in your life.
I think that's what I was going to go to is the fact that I don't mind sharing if I'm asked. I'm willing to do that. Say, yes, I've struggled with that. This is the time in my life that it happened. This is why it happened. This is how I saw Jesus in the situation, or how he helped me walk through it for a growth purpose. But just to all of a sudden blurt something out, I don't see the value in that.
For sure.
You know. So I think that's what you're saying is it's a controlled, direct group versus just putting it out there for everybody to read. Like recently, this has really kind of broken my heart. Recently, I've seen several Christians post on Facebook, well, you may hate me after all of this, but I just want to say what I really think. And then they start with filthy language, destroying everything that technically they're supposed to stand for. And if you don't like this, this is tough. This is just how I'm seeing things, and God bless you, bye. And I'm thinking, what was the value of that?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, and, I'm just going to throw this out there without totally articulating my thought, but I have to wonder if Facebook posting hasn't almost become the new text. Because sometimes I see these posts put out there, and isn't that something you would text your friend and ask, or text your mom, or whomever you have in your life, or share, hey, this is what's going on with my child, or whatever, and get some advice that way? Are we just putting on social media what really should be more of a private conversation with somebody we trust and can truly get wisdom and counsel from?
Well, I'm sure there's a bunch of millennials out there that are really laughing at us because we're talking so much about Facebook, because it happens in Twitter and Instagram and all of these Snapchats, all these other things. I think a lot of times it's a validation. They want to be validated for what they're feeling. And yes, I do think that a lot of the materials, things that you used to discuss with your close friends and your family members. But the problem is we are now in a place in society where Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, etc., is our friends. So to us, to so many people, that's where they get their feedback. That's where they get their instruction. That's where they get their guidance, is from all the friends that are out there floating around in no-no land. And it can create a real big problem.
Yeah.
Cammie and I were talking about this earlier, that a lot of it probably could be my age and how I was raised.
No.
I think so. I think that...
I wasn't talking about that. I would never go there. But that's what Betty was saying.
I was just being authentic, transparent.
I appreciate you being real.
But when I was growing up, we were raised, whatever is happening in our lives, we take care of it within our own home. We don't
broadcast it.
We don't broadcast it to anybody, just within our family. And it was just a big no-no. You just did not do it. And I think that is, and I struggle with that, especially when I'm talking to someone that's, 15, 20, 30 years younger than I am.
Well, I think that a lot of the stuff, this transparency reel, all of these words that we're throwing out here today, they came from a time where, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and definitely before that, it was unacceptable, like you said, to air your dirty laundry. Mm-hmm. Your parents didn't talk about sex around you. A lot of kids didn't even see their parents kiss or hug each other back in that era because socially it was unacceptable. And so then you get these kids that are being raised by latchkey parents that don't have a guidance system to help them discern when it's appropriate to share and when it's inappropriate to share. What you share, what you don't share, just for protection, if nothing more. And so we've got this pendulum that has taken place from this very strict, no disclosure, no discussion, no interaction with anybody other than your family, and sometimes not even them, to this extreme of writing people in 7 different countries, plus telling them every little dirty secret that you have or struggle that you're facing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with sharing the struggles, but what are you bringing out as a result? Are you pulling them down with you? Are you seeking man's opinion rather than, if you're a believer, searching out the things of the Lord because he has the answers? Are you willing to wait it out? Are you willing to seek him? Are you willing to pray through? Or are you wanting man's opinions? And I think because women have flesh on them, at least when we see them in person, we want to be drawn to that more than we do a God that we don't feel like we can touch because we don't know him as well as we need to. And so we've got that extreme taking place. And hopefully pretty soon we're going to come back to the middle and be able to have a balance between the appropriate sharing, discussing, nothing to be ashamed of, but just doing it, and the hidden factors.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things you were talking about is so important is when we are sharing. I'll say sharing our story, sharing my story. It's so important that when we're talking with people that we bring them back to what God has done, because that's the only one that's going to have the answer. He's the only one that has any of the answers. And as Christians, as believers in Jesus Christ, it's so important that we bring them back to that point. That it was all because of him that we survived. It was all because of him that I'm still standing. It's all because of him that I can get through my day.
Well, and Cammie, I think you addressed this a little bit with sharing the victories that have taken place. Mm-hmm. And it used to be a prime component in your church life that you practice giving testimony. And what giving testimony was is you were telling of the good and the bad things that had happened, but also what came out of that. What did you learn? Even though it was a rough place, what did you learn from it? How can you encourage others to stand firm, to hold on to the gospel? Because God doesn't say it's not going to happen. Pain isn't going to happen. He just says, I'll be there with you if you give me the opportunity. And I think that if we could bring back that concept where our words need to be speaking life instead of death, that would flip a lot of things. And I'm reminded of Philippians 4:8, which many of us have memorized that over the years. And it's, finally, my brothers and sisters, always think about what is true. Think about what is noble, right, and pure. Think about what is lovely and worthy of respect. If anything is excellent or worthy of praise, think about these kinds of things. And I think what happens a lot of times when we're getting into that mode of sharing, we tend to share the bad. Mm-hmm. And we end up getting in the cycle of destruction. We're verbalizing negativity. We're thinking negativity. And we can't seem to focus on what could come that is good out of the situation. And here we got a direct quote from Scripture telling us, don't think about the darkness. Think about what the good things are and talk about these things. Live these things, focus on these things, and that's going to pull you up out of that darkness.
Well, and too, so on that note, what I have observed, I can't stand the label of millennial, but, you know, for the sake of simplicity and everybody kind of coining that term, talking about the younger generation, what I see as a common theme is they all want this God story. And so you see these kids that have grown up in church and they may feel that they don't have one. And so then they're almost just trying to dig up some negative thing and then call that their God story of how God has transformed that one thing, and totally dismissing the fact that their story, you know, is full of pages. It's not just one moment.
That's good.
But it's what is God doing now? And so I went to a couple young people just in interest of doing this video project. And instantly, as I kind of posed the question to them, of, you know, what God's doing in their life, they went to a moment in their past. And I had to bring them forward. No, what is God doing
Today.
now? And they get stuck there in that negative pattern of, you know, they see it as a transformational moment. So that's positive in some sense. But I just wonder if, I'm kind of being repetitive now, but if they forget that God's still doing things in their life.
Well, you know, it's not just the millennials. You know, it is all generations. I see this happen in 90-year-olds, 80-year-olds, 70-year-olds, 60-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 40-year-olds, all the way down. Everybody has a tendency, because Satan wants to keep us in the dark. He wants to create this time where we have lack of understanding. So if we focus on the past rather than rejoicing over the past or knowing that it exists and focusing on today, where am I at with the Lord today? Am I the same I was yesterday, or am I progressing forward? Am I in a hindering spot, or am I in a victorious spot? And story is another, this is a term that I'm hearing really big right now.
Yep.
My story, God's story. And I liked how you said that. The pages of the book are still being written.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, both of you, but, you know, when we talk about sharing our testimony, you know, you want to spend some time in that moment of salvation, but really the greater impact on who you're sharing it with is what God's doing now and how he's still at work. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. We used to recommend people when they went to share their testimony, think of it this way. Think of it in a block of 4 fourths. 1 quarter, you talk about the way you were before. 1 quarter, you talk about what happened upon salvation and how you came to know Christ. And then you've got the remainder, 2 quarters, of time spent on what God has done in your life since, what he is doing now, because that's the truth of the gospel, is the changed life, the life on fire. And if we use our salvation as our moment in time and nothing else happens from that point that's great, then we need to examine a little bit why.
Well, we're all still a work in progress, too. God's not done with any of us yet, otherwise we would not be here. And
I would be okay with that.
What did you guys, you kind of touched on this a little bit, just more of from a vague standpoint about generationally, what you guys were taught about being authentic, transparent. But I mean, would you be willing to share what did you learn or catch from your own parents in regards to those 2 words?
There are some things that are just private. You know, you keep it in-house, so to speak. I learned to trust my parents. I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but I learned to trust them, and I probably have a more difficult time trusting other people, maybe. I don't know. I value family, and I'm not saying that, you know, people that share with everybody do not value their family, but...
So in you know, sorry to interrupt you, but I'm not sure I can find the words that I need to ask the question better, but did you feel like while your parents protected, you know, certain things that should have been private, did you also see them being kind of authentic and transparent with, you know, whomever they chose to do that with? Was that modeled for you in some regard?
Oh, mine did, yeah.
Yeah.
They had friends, but if they were going to share their troubles, it was always with, well, my dad had a bunch of brothers and 1 sister, and that's who he would share with. He would call them and talk to them about it. My mom would do the same thing. So I saw it. Yeah, I saw them model it.
I think for me, my stepfather was from a Christian circle where everything was very strict, and not strict, but very regimented. And not a true strong relationship with Christ was what was progressed. It was like, you know who God is and you just do these things. You don't have a relationship in fullness. And so he tended to be very quiet, or not sharing if there's struggles. He'd get mad. You'd see that all the time. I'd say that's authentic when you get to experience the anger, the frustrations of the family dynamics. Whereas my mother came from a background where you had relationship with Christ. That was who you went to for your troubles and your problems. And so what I saw modeled was, if there was a situation that came up, you went to prayer. You asked people that you felt would truly pray for you, to pray and get an answer, to help you, to strengthen you, to meet the need, whatever it was. So that's what was modeled for me. And then that takes me off on a whole other thing when it comes to Facebook. But, so I kind of saw a twist of that, a combination of that. But I think in general, society in the time that I was being raised was part of respecting your family was respecting their stories and not just sharing it with everybody and stuff. Which there again, I'm not saying that that's the only way to go, but I think there's a balance of knowing what to share and when to share it and how to share it and who to share it with.
Yeah.
And that's what we've lost. There's
no
no
discernment in
yeah,
that.
there's no barriers. There's no
boundaries.
No boundaries of understanding of what's appropriate, when it's appropriate, and how it's going to benefit or if it's going to tear down. And as believers, we're called to examine the words that come from our mouth. We're called to examine our actions. Do they align with Scripture? If they don't, then what do we do about it? And I'm seeing this merging of the world into Christianity that is robbing us of the truths of the gospel, because it's the cheap grace. Well, you're covered, so who cares?
Yeah. So with our last few minutes of this show, we want to leave our listeners with a little bit of a takeaway. Mm-hmm. And we didn't plan this, but I'm going to throw it out there because I think we can come up with a few things. So on that note, I think that that's a great takeaway, is to install some filters in what we're sharing, either verbally, amongst each other, whether it be small group or with a friend or whatever, or acquaintance. And then there's the social media. So what are some good filters that people could install into what it is that they're communicating? And I'm going to kind of start us off while you guys are thinking of just that self-examination piece. Why? Why am I going to share this? What is my motive? And only you can answer what your true motive is. Is it to create envy in others? Is it, to get people to feel bad for you?
Gain favor.
To, what did you use the word earlier? To be validated is a huge one. So that self-examination of just really asking myself, why am I about to share this, or why am I about to post this? You guys have anything else that we could install as a good filter?
Maybe am I trying to manipulate a situation?
Okay.
I've been sitting here thinking about, I told you I looked up the definitions for the words, and I've been sitting here thinking about the scriptures that talks about that, not to hide our light, let our light so shine. Jesus is the light, because the definition of transparency is that it is something, or you are sheer enough to allow the light to shine through.
That's good.
So maybe one of the boundaries would be, as a believer, is what I am posting, is that going to let others know that I am a follower of Jesus Christ? What am I saying? What am I posting? What am I sharing? What am I Snapchatting? Does that allow the light of Jesus to shine through?
Good. I like it.
I think that for me, stopping and pausing before I do something, and then what comes to mind is Psalms 19, verse 14. It says, I hope my words and thoughts please you, Lord. And you are my rock, the one who saves me. So when I do this, is this going to please you? And if it's not, am I willing to lay it down as my sacrifice?
Very good. Very good. So we got 3 filters. Can you sum them up for me, Betty?
Oh my goodness.
Just self-examination. Why am I doing this? Yours is God is His light going to shine through this? Are people going to see Christ in me?
And does this please the Lord?
And does this please the Lord? I think that's excellent. We can all apply those even ourselves and just pause. We want to thank our listeners so much for joining us for today's show. Great conversation. We hope that you guys enjoyed it. I'll kind of end on sharing this. Betty and I had talked earlier on in kind of creating the show of, women like to eavesdrop. And we thought this radio show would give women a way to do that and not feel bad about it. So we hope you've enjoyed kind of eavesdropping on our conversation today and that it inspired you, encouraged you, and even challenged you. We want you to stay tuned for our next show. I think we'll be talking about community. Doing
life together.
Doing life together. So please join us next Wednesday. Again, that's another episode of Living Well, and you can find us here every Wednesday at 1 p.m. on KATB 89.3 in Anchorage, as well as KJLP 88.0 in Palmer. If you can't tune into those, please do join us online at katb.org or our Facebook page at Living Well Radio. We'll see you next Wednesday.